All right, everybody, welcome back to the Evernest Real Estate Investor Podcast. I am one of your hosts, Spencer Sutton, and I've got with me my co-hosts, Matthew Whitaker and Gray Hall. Guys, welcome back to the podcast.
What's going on, guys?
What's up? Glad to be back.
Not everybody at once. As you can tell, we didn't plan the introduction.
And we need a batting order at this point.
We do need a batting order. I was kind of pointing at Gray, but he didn't get the message. So,
all right. Well, good. Well, welcome back, guys. Listen, this is our second podcast, and we're going to be talking today about setting goals for your investment. Just setting investment goals. I mean, I like to call them targets. A lot of people call them goals, but let's kick it off. I think it's important, really. Why don't we talk about the why behind this? Like, why is it important, Matthew and Gray, do you guys think, to set targets, to set goals when you have decided, you've made the decision, hey, I want to invest in real estate? Why do you need goals?
I think having a vision for where you're headed is probably one of the most important things you can possibly do. I was actually with some friends of mine that are in this similar business, and we were talking about vision and the importance of vision, and like understanding the destination is like incredibly important to understanding how to get there. And so setting goals is just setting the vision for what you want to accomplish with this investment, with your investment career. And then, and look at, one of the things I think people think, well, I don't know exactly where I want to head, but you having a clear picture of what a win is incredibly important.
Yeah. And I think starting with vision, knowing where you want to go, and that can change over time. But what I've found, if you're not intentional with it, starting with the vision of where you want to go, there's a good chance that it might just be a desire, and a year from now, I'm kind of no closer to that goal. So part of it is the vision part, but then a lot of what we're going to talk to is kind of, all right, tactically, how do you break that down into what today am I working towards, pushing the domino that's going to lead to the next domino, lead to the next thing. And so it's kind of tying that long-term vision, which a lot of times can seem really far out in the future. If your goal is $10,000 a month in net cash flow, what am I doing today to be able to get there? And it's a long process and it takes consistency. But if you write it down, there's a much higher chance of achieving that goal, which is kind of all what we're talking about today, is being intentional, starting with the end in mind, and then working back to what actions today can I take in the 5 minutes, the hour that I've got to help me push towards my investment goals.
Yeah, I agree. And I think like innate in each of us is this desire to grow. Like we have in each of us a desire to achieve something in life. And I think that's just natural. And so a great book that I read is by Carol Dweck called Mindset. And she talks in that about having a growth mindset or having a static mindset. And so, I think it's extremely valuable to have vision, paint a vision, set targets so that you know where you're going. Right. And, probably a very easy example could be in your health. Right. So if you don't have a vision of where you want to go and how you want to be healthy, like how do you know if you're achieving what you're supposed to set out and do? And
I think a lot of people have desires. I think everybody, desires to be better, but what are you doing about it to kind of work towards those goals? I think that's kind of the missing void a lot of times from people who are successful. And there's a lot of different definitions of successful, but when we're kind of talking about the investment goals, there's a lot of people who want this kind of passive income or want to build X amount for retirement. But the important piece is writing it down, getting very, very specific on what you've got to do to get there.
And I think when times get tough, and they will, like this is not a get rich quick thing, building wealth through real estate. I think a lot of people are out there selling it as a get rich quick thing. But when times get tough, you've got to kind of climb back up and see, hey, what is the end goal? What am I trying to accomplish? It kind of gets you re-energized.
Yeah. And not everything's going to go perfectly, right? So you're going to have to course correct. There's going to be times where like, hey, I hit a roadblock. How do I course correct? What do I need to change? What do I need to do? But if you don't have that vision, then you won't have any idea. You're more likely to give up than to keep going.
Yeah. It's an emotional thing, and there's things that happen whenever you have rental properties. And I think having that kind of where I'm getting to helps you get through those harder times when you're dealing with a contractor, a bad tenant issue. Starting with the end in mind and kind of reminding yourself, hey, this is what we're working to. And this is kind of normal, and part of it kind of speaks about the emotional, but then having kind of the objective, all right, this is part of the plan. This is okay. I knew things that were going to go wrong, and it still kind of moved me to where I want to be.
So I think I want to jump in here, and really Spencer's going to kind of take over this podcast and we'll provide some color, but as Spencer's done a great job of teaching at our company, the goal setting process. And so Spencer, you've really studied this subject. You've gone through, you've kind of been a part of a program that teaches this goal setting process. And so what we're going to try to do is relate it to investing in real estate. And so I'd love for you to kind of lay the groundwork for how someone can start to, set these goals. And also, I think if you already have these goals, I think you're probably going to learn something today that will add to that vision, add to, what you're doing, which will add gas to the fire.
Yeah. So let's get started. I mean, to me, the biggest, or like the foundation of what you have to do is step number one is you just have to be very, very clear about the facts of your current situation, right? So you can't, it's really hard. I mean, everybody loves to look at the future and say, hey, I want to have, like Gray was talking about, this much passive income in a year, in 5 years, and 10 years. But you have to be very brutally honest with where you currently are. And so I think step number one, I know step number one is to write down the facts of where you are, right? So what are the facts of your current situation? So that could be things like how many, and these are all objective, right? This is not subjective. These are all objective facts. How much money do I have available to buy real estate? What is my net worth? What is my current network of others needed to get this done? These could be real estate agents, could be a rehab crew, attorneys, CPAs, property managers. And then like things like how much time do you have available? So I think like getting brutally honest about where you currently are, even access to capital, is extremely important.
Jim Collins came up with this idea in his book, Good to Great, the brutal facts. Like he said, some of the best CEOs, and look, if you're investing in real estate, you're starting your own business, you're the CEO of your organization. And he said the best CEOs were the best ones at being brutally honest and what he called the brutal facts. In fact, one CEO suggested that his whole job was to pick up the rocks and find the squiggly things underneath the rocks. It's very easy to avoid your situation by leaving the rock down, but the best CEOs, the best leaders, the people that are getting things done are very objective about their current state.
And I think it's very uncomfortable to do this, if we're being honest. I mean, I remember the first time going through this, and you can apply this to a lot of different areas of your life. It might be uncomfortable to look and say, hey, I've only got, X amount of available capital to spend, or I've only got this amount of time. But if you are not clear with that, you're going to be, either jumping into things that you can't handle, which creates another stressful situation, which might not, is going to probably derail you from your path. And so I think that's why it's super important. And there's no minimums here. I mean, I think people have started with no money, but I think you can even start a plan of, all right, I need to save this much, or I need to increase my income. And so it can be very uncomfortable. That is okay. That is totally normal. But going through kind of all those things that Spencer, talked about with your current realities helps you formulate a plan. And that's just, being brutally honest about where you're at. You've got to have that if you want to put a plan that's going to work. Because if you create a plan that for somebody in a much different scenario who has got more time or more capital, it's not going to get you where you want to go.
Yeah. And if you don't look at these facts, then typically what I've seen is that most people end up living in a fantasy world. It's wishful thinking. It's not reality. It's, hey, I'm going to ignore all these issues. I don't want to address these. I just want to look at this pie in the sky goal I want to achieve. So step number one, get very, very clear about the facts. Then step number two is what I teach people to do is write down the feelings about those facts. So when you look at those facts, how do they make you feel? these, why I think this is important is because feelings can be a very strong motivator of action. And if we're not being very honest about our feelings, then I think we're losing some of that motivation.
Can you give some examples? Like if you're going to kind of walk through some of these, what might be some of the feelings that you would kind of uncover, and I guess why is that important?
Yeah. So if I were looking at my funds available and and it was really, really low, what are the feelings associated with this fact? Well, frustrated, irritated, like giving them names, writing them down. How does that make you feel when you look at these facts? I think it's really, really important. And again, it's just can be a source of motivation when we typically don't even look at these things, right? So you said, Gray, that most people, it can be uncomfortable, right? So we need to like look at how these facts make us feel.
And they can be positive, right? Like somebody may be in a great position where they have a bunch 100%. Of extra cash and, you feel like you've accomplished something. So just know it can be a positive feeling, it can be a negative feeling. The whole thing is you want to like embrace reality, as Ray Dalio says, and then deal with it. So the whole idea of this is embracing reality, embracing how you feel about it. Back in 2008, 2009, when the market crashed, I didn't do this, but Spencer and I were both around during the last crash. And so we were building up these rental portfolios and really thought we had it together in 2006, 2007, when the market crashed. And when the market crashed, there was like 2.5 years in there when we were getting the property management business started, or I was getting it with some old partners of mine. That I felt defeated, right? Like, man, this is just not working out like I thought it was. Like I thought success would be a linear path, that I would, never, each year as I was making more money, I would never make less money. And so there's all these feelings that are associated with that, but getting real about what the facts are and then how you feel about that is so incredibly important, because you're essentially naming, objectively identifying those feelings. And that starts to help you separate yourself from the reality, right? Because you are not the reality. The situation is what it is. And so this kind of helps you separate it. So now you can start objectively thinking about it and doing something about it.
I love that. Seeing the brutal facts and then dealing with it. I think that's a lot of this is. Yeah, that might be your current situation now, but what are we going to do to kind of work out of that? Or what are we going to do to leverage the great situation that you are in?
That's right. And so I would say step number 3 is then once you have the facts and you have the feelings, write down, like make 2 lists. What are the stories and what are the stories you've told yourself, and what are the patterns and behaviors that have produced your facts? And so stories may be a new concept to people, but like we are always telling ourselves stories in our head all of the time. And I'll say this, like marketers, I'm a marketer. I love marketing. Marketers are trying to tell you a story every time you watch their commercial. And I think some of the best ones are like Apple. Like I love this commercial, Apple Watch. You guys have probably all seen it. The guy's sitting on his couch. He looks at his Apple Watch. Then another version of himself appears. And then all of a sudden he's walking in the street with 2 other versions of himself. Then he's jogging, and then he's running. And then all of a sudden they're on the beach, and a new version of himself runs past and jumps in the water. And the tagline is there's a better version of you in you. And so, there are stories that we're always telling ourselves. And the story that Apple's trying to get you to believe is you buy this Apple Watch, you will be swimming in the ocean. You will be healthy. That is the story. So when you're looking at your current situation, the facts, what are the stories you've told yourself that have gotten you where you are? Like whether that's good or bad. Could be good stories, could be stories that aren't serving you at all.
Yeah, as I think about stories too, I also think about it's not just the stories that you're telling yourself, but it's also the stories of the people around you telling you. And so I think this is also an important time to also identify what are the stories that are coming from others around you, the friends you hang out with, the things that you're consuming, content that you're consuming. One of the things that you always hear that you are essentially the 5 people that you hang around the most. And I've found that to be true, especially when we can look at our kids and see that how important it is that they hang out with the right crowd, and that's going to drive what they do. We are no different than our kids. We're going to be who we associate with. One of the things that I have found that's really, and we may come back to this later in another episode, but one of the things that I found that's very, that helps me with my stories is also reading other successful people's stories and realizing that success isn't, going back to what I said earlier too, not completely linear. For instance, I'm reading Walt Disney's biography, which the founder of Airbnb says is his favorite book. And it's amazing. Like, Walt Disney's life was mostly tragedy and struggle. And, he had 4 or 5 hit movies and was still borderline running out of money. So, we think about Walt Disney as having all this success and, oh man, what a great life. And you realize, no, like while he was getting his flywheel going, it was struggle after struggle, and people were hard to deal with. And so, not only are you getting stories internally, you're probably getting stories externally. And the question is, how are you internalizing those stories that you're getting?
And Spencer mentioned mindset. I think mindset story is kind of another way to frame it. I've seen the positive impact, just like Matthew was saying, being around other people who tell themselves stories of, hey, I can achieve bigger goals. Like Matthew has this very big vision that he's been selling for a long time. And I would say it's a story, or it's a mindset, hey, we can achieve bigger things. And so I've seen that being around other people who invest, people who have this ambitious mindset, who do not kind of let things get in their way. That's a story they're telling themselves, that I'm not going to let this thing change my circumstance. And then I think, kind of relating it all back to, the stories and the people around you are super important, but we also, I think being objective about it gives you the tactical ability to change it. Cause I think that's one thing I struggled with a long time. How do you change your mindset? And I've seen writing it down and kind of stepping back and being objective about it lets me be able to control that. Because I think once you start doing the habits that then kind of lead to success, it helps to change your mindset of, I can work out. I did it one time, I'm going to do it tomorrow. And so I think all of those kind of the stories of the mindset are super important when looking at all of these.
Yeah. Stories impact your patterns and behaviors. They're going to drive your patterns and behaviors. And so let's just take the real estate investor. Let's say the person who's starting out, and they've been thinking about it for a year, 2 years, 3 years. They've been thinking about it, but they haven't taken any action. So what are some stories that they might be telling themselves? Well, I just was thinking about this before we got on the podcast, and like some of the stories could be, well, I need to do more research. And so these people are always doing research, and the story they're telling themselves is, I don't know enough. I can't pull the trigger. I don't know enough. Or another story might be, well, the market's not right. Like, it's not time to buy. I need to wait for a shift in the market before I buy. Or I don't have access to capital. So-and-so was born in this environment and they have all the access to capital that they need, and I just don't have access to capital. So it keeps them from taking action.
I think you can break that down. All right, I don't know enough about the market. Okay, that could be a limiter, and some people may not kind of push through that. I also work with investors who live out of state, who may have never been to Birmingham yet, and they say, hey, I don't know the market, but I want to learn more about it. And then they put a plan in place. Hey, I'm going to listen to these 5 podcasts. I'm going to plan a trip. I'm going to talk to these 6 people. And then you kind of get to a place where the story, if you kind of realize the story isn't getting you where you want to go, then you can kind of form the patterns and the behaviors to get you where you want to go. Or the market. I think the market kind of is a fear for people. Are we at the top? Is this the right time to buy? Is this the wrong time to buy? What I've done is, okay, who are the best people, analyzing data in the market? What are they doing? Also learning from people who have been investing for 10 or 20 years and asking them how they view it. Because the people who've been in this a long time, there's no right time to buy. If you've got a long-term mindset, then you will kind of be able to ride out the storms. And so, taking those stories, kind of breaking down, if that is a limiter, what are the things I need to do to feel more confident, to have more information, to be able to make an action and not let that kind of stop you. And look, you might determine that the market that you were looking at is not the right market, but at least and then you're kind of at least one step closer to finding the market that you want to be in.
The stories I dealt with were other people's stories. I was so worried about what other people's stories were about me that's been a limiter on my success, I think, in my life. And I can see it through the eyes of somebody that's trying to get into this. What happens if I mess up? What happens if I lose money and I've told everybody this is what I want to do and I find out I'm not going to be good at it? Well, I got news for you. You're not going to be good at this when you first get started. You're going to make mistakes. It's just like doing anything. The longer you do it, the more reps you get, the better you're going to be at it. But I, for so long, let other people's stories. The other thing too is like, I had this pride, like even getting into something new like this, I didn't want to go ask questions of people that knew because I didn't want to be the guy that didn't know, right? Like having the confidence to be able to ask newbie questions and not worry about what others are thinking about you is a great trait to have anytime you're trying to learn something new. So for me, it was just letting others hold me back based on what they're thinking. And the truth is they're not really thinking about me.
They're not. That's what I was about to say. They're not really.
That was what I realized. When I realized, a quick side story, when I realized that, one of the things I found is like, you see in your kids, like some of the same struggles that you dealt with. And it's so terribly obvious in them. And what I realized was like my son was playing sports and I can tell he's letting what others think about him. He doesn't want to mess up. He doesn't want to strike out. He doesn't want to, drop a pass. And what happens is you inevitably do exactly what you don't want to happen because you're so fixated on that. And what I realize is that like nobody, it doesn't matter. Like what the other parents, what the other kids think, like doesn't matter. Like, it really is like this big story that he's telling himself. And then I realized, holy crap, like I'm doing the same thing. My world, right? I'm still doing that. And I'm doing it at the time, 30 something years old. And it was like crazy. It was like an epiphany for me. And then I realized I don't really care what other people think about me because honestly, they're not thinking about me. And even if they are, like, it doesn't matter what they think about me. And so having that type of mindset when you get into this and then tying it back to this fact map, what are the brutal facts? How am I telling these stories about myself and getting real with yourself about what's holding you back from accomplishing something?
I think another important part about getting clear about this, I'm working with a ton of investors. The investors who are making progress have done this. They know their facts. They know what they can and can't do. They've done the work to understand the market and they're not afraid to ask questions. I mean, that's the reality is like real estate is a team sport. Now you're kind of out there on your own, but you need local contacts. You need wholesalers, agents, you need property manager, construction, and the people who are kind of refreshing to work with ask all the questions and kind of get it out ahead, opposed to being afraid to ask that question. Those are also people, they're hitting singles, they're making progress towards those goals, opposed to if you haven't done all this work, it's really, really going to limit you. And this is kind of a fundamental thing, which is why it's one of our first episodes to talk through. So very important if you do want to get there to do all these things. And I'm working with people who they've done all this work and it is paying off in dividends for them.
Yeah. And I would say probably, Gray, for every 10 investors that you work with who have done this work and who have looked at all of this, there's 100 that haven't, right? There's 100 that are just kind of sitting on the sidelines and they're letting their stories, what other people think about them, what they're thinking, their own stories kind of hold them back from taking action.
So you've got control to change it, And that's right. That's what this is kind of take time after this to think through this and put in the work to put yourself in a position to start making progress.
I think it could be a big limiter on some of the professionals out there that are, at the top of their game in some other industry, and coming back and being a newbie feels really weird, right? Like being the one that doesn't know all the answers. So, I heard one time a guy say, pride will keep you broke. And that is the case. You got to go back and be humble enough to ask the right questions, even if you're a top talent in some other industry.
And I think also not doing this can do one of two things. So yes, it can hold you back from taking action. It can also cause you to just act foolishly, right? You're not asking the right questions and you start making decisions based on what you think. And man, you can get in trouble that way.
Well, it's stressful when you do that. I mean, there's financial implications and there's the stress, and that kind of affects the rest of your life. I mean, when you see people make bad investments, now it's not always because of this, but you can do a lot of the work to limit risk. Cause I think there's risk in real estate investing. Investing in nature just has risk in there. And a lot of this is limiting the risk and kind of, tailoring what you need to do to your current situation. Cause we want you to be successful in that. And the only way for you to do that is to not make impulsive decisions that might stretch you beyond your means. I mean, that's a very, very stressful place to be, kind of knowing where you're at. And if you don't have the capital, all right, what steps do you need to take to get that capital or get the experience or get the team in place?
So the last step in this foundational work that we've been talking about is, once you have identified your stories, kind of the patterns and behaviors that have gotten your facts, now you just need to look at and write down what's working and what's not working. Like what's working that I'm doing and what's not working, what's serving me and what is not serving me. Based on what is currently going on in my life, what is, the facts of this situation, what's working, what's not working. That helps you get very objective. Mm-hmm. And then you're sitting there looking at it and you're saying, okay, I've done all this work. I know where I am. Now it's time to shift. And it's time to ask the question, what do I really want? Like, what do I want? And this is a vital, vital question. And the way I like to do it, and Matthew, you and I have discussed this because you have a little bit different take, but what I like to do is I like to look 12 months out. I don't typically take it to a 3-year or 5-year and a 10-year. I literally look at it 12 months because to me, that's something that I can see and I can say, okay, I can deal with this. And I don't want to overestimate and get so discouraged if I don't hit something that 10 years, like this is never going to happen in 10 years. I really want to focus on, hey, what's possible in 1 year? So the question I like to ask is in 12 months, what do I want to see? Like, what is the fruit of the 12 months work that I'm going to do? What do I really want to see? And it needs to be measurable, very clear, very objective. And it's something that you can't achieve in Q1 or Q2. Right. So this is not something that you're going to say, oh, well, I want to, you can't make up some weak target for 12 months, knowing in the back of your mind, I'll probably hit it in, in 3 months or whatever. That's weak. Can't do that.
Yeah, this is an area where you and I disagree.
Yeah, I'm probably on Team Matthew on this one.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, for our business, yes, 10-year. I love that.
Spencer, you have the right to be wrong in this situation.
I'm just not. So, but yeah, you're right. I do.
No, I think I think the real answer is like, what's right for you. Right.
Yeah,
right. I mean, different people, the point is that you have something. And what I like to look at is where do I want to be in 10 years? Jim Collins calls it a BHAG. If you've ever read EOS, Entrepreneurial Operating System, it's a book called Traction by a guy named Gino Wickman. He actually talks about it being your 10-year target. What I like is something very aspirational to shoot for. And so a lot of the plans that, especially with growing wealth through real estate, because it takes so long, I always like to look at where am I going to end up? And then I like to back it down to what do I need to do in the next 3 years to get there? And then I'll come in connection with you. What do I need to do in the next year? Right. And then we even break it down into quarterly and then weekly and then daily. What do I need to do today to get me to my quarterly goal, to get me to my annual goal, to get my 3-year goal, to get me to my 12 or my 10-year goal. Right. And so I like to look at it like that because I think I get excited about the vision, right? Like the person I'm becoming. And chasing a big vision for myself is what gives me the energy to do whatever I need to do today. You some people may say, I like tangible things that I'm going to accomplish. And I would even say, hey, you can still do that with my plan, but maybe you can't see 10 years out. But I still think, whatever your flavor is, I think it's important that you write it down. Whether you want to shoot for an annual goal or write down what we would call a 10-year target.
Yeah, I think one of probably one of the challenges that I have with doing the 10-year is because I'm also like, I'm looking at 4 different elements of life, right? So I'm looking at the body, I'm looking at the being, which is spiritual life. I'm looking at the balance, which is my family life, and I'm looking at business. So those 4 domains I'm looking at, and this is like doing it for 1 year, doing a foundation and then a future, and then a quarterly is a ton of work. But I agree with you. I mean, there's nothing, obviously it's what works for you.
Yeah, I think it's harder to do that for a health goal. What does it look like in 10 years? I think that's a lot more. All right. And I think you should spend majority of your time on kind of that 1 year plan. But even if real estate investing, if your goal is to have $10,000 a month in cash flow and you need X amount of capital, if you know you want to get there, that's probably going to change your 12-month target, where it might not be buy one rental. It might be increase your income, or it might be flip 2 properties to get $50,000. And so that in year 2, you can buy, 3 rentals there. And so I think depending on what it is, but I think for real estate investing, I think it is really good to start with. And it doesn't have to be specific. It's going to change over time, but I think giving you a vision to get excited. All right, what does that look like? And then what would my life look like if I had this amount of income from a real estate business? Yeah. And how would that kind of change me and my family's life? I think those kind of things can be motivating, but then spending the actual work on the daily activities, the weekly, the quarterly, that build up to the 12-year. And every year you can kind of reset this. You get to, look and, pivot if you need to, and hopefully make the goal bigger as you go. Like, hopefully right now you're not thinking as big as you will in a year from now, when you see how much you can accomplish whenever you methodically knock after things day after day after day. And that would be the goal, is set a big goal and probably realize there's a good chance you can surpass that, and your vision's going to grow the more time you spend on this, and the deeper in your investing career you get.
100%. Like, once you start like keeping promises to yourself over and over and over again, you get this flywheel going, and all of a sudden your vision does open up, and you're like, you know what? Yeah. Like, opportunities are opening up for my investment career. Like, I'm meeting people that I never would have thought of. And you may need to course correct. It may be, hey, I want to own 100 single family residential, but in 2 or 3 years, you may say, well, you know what? I'm going to start looking at multifamily or whatever. So I agree with that. Just getting that momentum is huge.
And tying it back to the daily habit, I think that's one of the things that people miss. And look, if you set a 10-year target and it doesn't motivate you to get up today and do something about it, then maybe you do need a 1-year target, right? Because it's so important to tie it back to, what am I doing today? John Maxwell has this, he's a leadership author and expert. He has this theory called the rule of 5. And he says, every day it's like chopping a tree. If I get up and do these 5 things towards my goals, I may not chop the tree down today. I'm going to take 5 whacks at the tree. But over the course of time, we know that if I go hit that tree 5 times with the axe, the tree is going to fall. Mm-hmm. And so what is the kind of rule of 5, to use his terminology, that I've got to do today that will help me achieve my goal? And I think that's where this is where people get off track, because they'll do it for a month. I mean, working out's the perfect example, right? They'll do it for a month, they'll do it for 2 months, and then all of a sudden they lose the discipline, they lose the habit. And it's incredible. It's amazing to see how incredibly disciplined successful people are to their habits. They may not be disciplined people overall, but in certain areas, they're very disciplined. Michael Phelps used to tell a story. He had ADD, couldn't concentrate in school, like was a problem child in school. But what he realized is that swimming, he could swim every day. So he swam 7 days a week. And that was his kind of rule of 5, right? And so he became, one of the greatest Olympians of all time by just getting in the pool and swimming every day. Now, he had obviously some gifts that allowed him to do that, but the point is the same, is that you've got to, even though he had struggles with ADD, he could get in the pool and concentrate for hours at a time. We're asking you to do that for your daily habits, for your success.
I think that brings up 2 things. I think he enjoyed it and he was gifted in it. I think that's what I found with a lot of investors. they enjoy it. I mean, real estate is like my hobby. Like I enjoy learning about it. You have to kind of enjoy that because it is hard. And I think it's really hard to stay disciplined with things that if you don't have a vision and you don't, enjoy it, or you don't think it's getting you where you want to go. And then, yeah, I think also too, this is really hard to do alone. And so I think that's why when people talk about a team, I think there's kind of the tactical team of how are you going to execute. But I think there's also, an accountability piece to this too. It's really hard to stay disciplined to goals if you're kind of on an island. So you've got a partner, or you've got a group of friends, and ideally people who think bigger than you, who are further ahead from you, who can hold you accountable to your goal. I mean, I would like, Michael Phelps had a team and had a coach. And I think that all of those kind of things that we can translate to real estate investing, when I'm around people who have a lot bigger goals than me, it makes you consistently kind of come back to, all right, what am I doing today? Because the daily habits, I think the reason people give up on habits is they don't see progress. And I think that's going to be a reality for the first 3 months. It might not feel like you're making much progress, but having that target that it's going to get you where you're going to go, and then having people around you that kind of hold you accountable and keep you motivated. Super important.
And I think that people give up on goals because a lot of times they're not aiming at anything. It's like Zig Ziglar calls it, they're wandering generalities and not meaningful specifics. Like that is, you have to be meaningful. And so what I would say here is once you have written down to me, I would write down several goals and then choose one for your 12-month target. Then you need to go back and connect. Okay, how is this going to make me feel when I hit this target? So you're going to pull up a list. Like you can Google a list of feelings. I think that's a great way to do it. Like there's tons of feeling words. Like when you accomplish this in 12 months, how is that going to make me feel? Write down those feelings. And then what are the stories that I need to tell myself to accomplish this? So you're going to need to connect the feelings and the stories and the patterns of behaviors. Like I'm thinking about working out, because a very easy one to point to. Last year, at the end of last year, I said, this is my target. I'm going to run this Spartan Ultra, and it's a 30-mile race. It's 60 obstacles. And at that point, I probably hadn't run more than 2 or 3 miles at one point. I just don't like running all that much. But that was a story I was telling myself. The story was, I don't like to run. And so what did I have to do? I had to go back and start reprogramming my mind and say, well, you know what? I love running and I'm willing to do whatever it takes to reach my goal. So therefore I run like it's a part of my training. And that's only because I've got this target out here and I know it's coming. Like there's no backing away from this thing because I've set it and this is what I'm going after. And you can do the same thing in real estate investing.
I think this is the piece of successful people that scares some people sometimes is becoming fairly obsessed with the goal, becoming a fanatic of the goal. And people are somewhat, when you run into somebody like that, sometimes it could, if in the wrong context, it could be off-putting. But I think it's incredibly important that people that are accomplishing their goals are incredibly focused, fanatics, and really almost kind of like crazy about solving that goal. And so it feels a little weird to be that. And, you don't want other people, again, getting back to what other people are going to think. If you become a fanatic about, becoming, let's say it's financially independent in 10 years from rental properties. But I mean, at the end of the day, that's a story you're telling yourself. And in 10 years, you're going to wish you had gotten started and wish you'd become a fanatic because the people that are making fun of you or, in your mind are probably not the ones doing this. I saw a quote from Denzel Washington that said, no successful person or somebody that's further ahead of you in your career ever made fun of you or looked down on you for the feelings you're feeling and the thoughts you're having. It's only people that are below you that don't have as big of goals that are doing that. And so that's not an exact quote, but I saw it somewhere on LinkedIn. And so I thought, that's very appropriate, right? Like those people are still going to be doing the same tired old things they're doing in 10 years. And taking this fact map process, you're going to set your goals. And I think next episode, we're going to talk about some plans that people can use around maybe rental property to essentially, build wealth through real estate.
So is that something we're going to do right now, or are you talking about another episode?
I think we probably do it in another episode.
Okay. Good.
I think
how long have we been talking now?
I don't know.
All right.
It's been fun though.
Yeah, it's about 40 minutes. It's been great. I hope this helps. I mean, you can take that 1 year target, and then like Matthew and Gray were both talking about, you have to bring it back down to the daily, the weekly, the monthly habits and things that you need to do to move it forward. And it may be at the very beginning, it's just skill set and mindset. Like you just need to spend the first quarter thinking about skill set and mindset. How do you develop that before, you start taking massive action? But this has been great, guys. Any final thoughts before we sign off?
I would say just get started.
Yeah.
I mean, start this process. Set aside some time. We call it time blocking, and just think through these steps that we talked about. And, I think that will lay the foundation for our next episode.
Yep. Totally agree.
All right, guys. Well, thank you for joining us. We want you to, if you haven't already, subscribe to this podcast. We would love for you to subscribe. We'd love for you to share it with your friends and leave us a review. Like if you thought this episode was helpful, leave us a review. It helps other people find us. All right. We'll be back next week with another episode of the Evernest Real Estate Investor Podcast. See y'all soon.
Bye, everybody.